Thank you for downloading this podcast from the British Theatre Guide. For more information about British Theatre Guide, please visit britishtheatreguide.info.
Paula Garfield MBE is Artistic Director of Deafinitely Theatre, a company that she co-founded in 2002 as the first deaf-launched and deaf-led professional theatre company in the UK, producing bilingual theatre in both British Sign Language and spoken English. Paula is taking her adaptation of the Vagina Monologues by V, formerly Eve Ensler, on a short tour. I spoke to Paula a couple of weeks before the performances, and I asked her, first of all, for those who weren't around when the play was a huge hit on both sides of the Atlantic in the 1990s, what the Vagina Monologues is about. The voice you will hear is that of BSL interpreter Kathy Yeoman-Owens.
Okay, so the Vagina Monologues was written by a woman called V, formerly Eve Ensler, and she wrote this play about women, about vaginas, about celebrating womanhood and femininity, and it went to small venues. It just had 3 actors in, first of all, and it was created from her interviewing women from all over the world and collecting their stories, and it just became the most iconic work. It became so impactful to women even now, and it's still performed now, and it's just a celebration. It's a liberation. I think a lot of women don't really talk about these topics, even with each other. I think they're a bit taboo. You know, we don't like talking about these things and sometimes we think, well, we're the only one going through certain issues. But I think, you know, the amazing thing about the Vagina Monologues is it really opens the door to those conversations and makes people realise you're not alone. You're not the only one. A lot of people go through these issues as well. And I think it's so important to really shine a light on these topics. And obviously for us as deaf people, we're presenting this production in British Sign Language. There'll also be written English captions as well. And the story it's not just about vaginas, it's about womanhood and women power and celebrating that. And to do it in BSL, to add British Sign Language, to add, you know, that visual layer to it, I think really makes the production incredibly unique. And I so admire and praise V for creating this work that's still very current today.
And is it the same play that it was in the 1990s, or has it been updated? Is it now a 2020s play?
There has been some updates to it by V. I think she has created some new sections of it. She's actually included a monologue about her own experience of giving birth. I think she's extended some elements. She's interviewed some women who've been through conflicts in Africa and the Middle East. So she's collected more stories. So I think she's really added stories to it. That's my understanding of it. And yeah, I think she's obviously added to it to make it more current and more relevant.
What sorts of issues does it cover then? What do the women talk about?
Oh gosh, David, anything and everything. I don't think the podcast is long enough for us to go through everything. You'll have to come and see it. There are monologues about relationships. There's some really emotional stuff about women who've been through sexual abuse. There's also some very comical moments. There's women who are exploring new feelings that they might be having about sexual attraction. There's women who are becoming older and how that affects you, and not just the changes to your body, but the changes to you mentally as well. And in this production, we've got 10 deaf actors who are going to be, performing the piece. And there are some ensemble work, there's some individual work, but it's still current. It's still relevant. It's still as impactful, I think, as it was back in the 1990s. And obviously we've got a whole fresh new audience who are finding the play now in 2025. And I think, we live in a world that's quite male dominated. A lot of the world leaders that we see on our news, the American leader currently, the British leader, it's all men, usually white men as well. So I think, we really need to celebrate women, celebrate womanhood, and, who is it for men to decide what we should be doing with our bodies and our lives? And I firmly believe that, every individual woman has the right to choose whatever she wants to do with her own life. There should be that respect of individuals and individuals' decisions. So I think, staging this play now in the current climate that we're in, it's very timely, and hopefully it will start a lot of conversations.
And what was the process of adapting it? Is it just a case of translating it into BSL, or is there more to an adaptation of for a Definitely Theatre production?
Oh, absolutely, David. Well, we adapt in and translate it into BSL, and I should share that we actually did a charity production of this 10 years ago, funnily enough, and then we decided to do it again 2 years ago in September of 2023. It was a one-night only charity gala performance at the Hackney Empire, and it was to raise money for deaf people who've been the victims of domestic abuse, and we raised funds to train some more independent domestic abuse advocates. So we did one night at the Hackney Empire, and I think we sold over 800 or 830, 40 tickets, which was amazing for us. And to see that whole space of the Hackney Empire of people embracing sign language and supporting BSL was just, it was incredible. And that night we had 20 deaf and hearing women and non-binary persons. So we had some monologues that were done individually, and then we had some group stuff as well. So back then we only had 2 days of rehearsal because everyone was volunteers, and it was obviously a charity production. So the response was just incredible, David. So we have decided this time to stage it again and take it on the road. We're going to Exeter, Birmingham and Sheffield, and we're so excited. And this time we've got 10 deaf performers, 10 deaf actors who are going to be performing the monologues in BSL. There will be a screen with live captions or subtitles, depending on what you prefer the word, that will project the English script. So if you're a non-BSL user, you can access and enjoy, but obviously non-BSL users can watch and appreciate and get a lot from the sign language delivery as well. So all our 10 actors are prepping madly at the moment. They're practicing, they're rehearsing their monologues, and they're going to have worked on a translation of it before we actually get into the rehearsal, because we've got a week together and we've got 2 qualified deaf BSL translators who've been through training and accreditation, and they're going to support the rest of our actors just to make sure that the translation is clear and that the content is clear and understandable for deaf and hearing audiences, as much as we can. So we're very excited about it. It's very visual production. BSL is very visual and adds, a layer to it that I think perhaps people haven't seen before.
10 actors seems quite expensive to take on the road for a small theatre company. Is this a big risk for you, such as a size of cast? Well,
indeed, but it's a short tour for us. So 3 venues, and that has absolutely reduced the risk for us. There were other theatre venues that were interested in having us, but we couldn't afford to do a longer tour. So for us, we're just touring it for a week, and we're rehearsing for a week. So it's a short project for us, so perhaps less risk. But yeah, absolutely. We're so excited to sort of give opportunities to 10 deaf actors, to put them on stage. And David, we've sold out into Sheffield at the Sheffield Crucible. We sold out our evening show at the Birmingham Rep. They've actually put on a matinee for us in the afternoon. And Exeter as well. I believe it's about half at the moment, and that's only been on sale quite recently. So, we haven't actually done that much marketing or publicity, but we have an audience. Deaf people out there are so happy to see a production that's led by deaf actors, that puts BSL centre stage. They're used to perhaps watching, adaptations with interpreters in the corner, but it's not the same. It doesn't provide the same access. BSL on stage is so vital, and they're coming to see us. And I have to say that V, or formerly Eve Ensler, has heard about our charity production 2 years ago and has heard about this tour as well with our 10 deaf performers, and is very excited about it and very supportive of BSL in this production. So we're thrilled by that.
Well, what's the response from theatres? I mean, Elizabeth Newman, who's the artistic director at Sheffield, was on the last episode of this podcast, actually. But what's the response from theatres? Do they see you as a risk to bring you into their theatres, or is this something that are you more welcome than you used to be?
Well, I think for me, David, I mean, theatre shouldn't worry about risks. I mean, I know we have to in the current climate, but theatre's about giving people new experiences, giving people those live experiences, bringing people together, bringing fresh perspectives, opening people's minds. What other medium can do that? And I think, we provide something unique. And putting BSL centre stage, hopefully that will encourage people to go out and learn BSL afterwards if they're non-BSL users. I mean, as we know, the British Sign Language Act was recognised by the UK government in, 2023, and it was formally recognised as a language of the UK since 2003. So, We've got legacy, we've got interest. There's a BSL GCSE currently, hopefully going into schools quite soon. That's still in development currently, so that young people will have a choice at GCSE level that they might want to do French or Spanish or German. They can do BSL instead. So I think there's a lot of interest in BSL, and we really need to capitalise on that. So I hope they don't see us as a risk. I hope they see us, as an added benefit to their program. For me, I don't see us as high risk compared to other theatres. No, not at all. I don't think we should think like that, because we bring an audience with us that's interested in what we put on stage.
But you don't have any issues with actually selling your work into theatres. They welcome your theatre as much as any other theatre.
I think absolutely. When we contact theatres and say what we're doing, and when we explain the concept, particularly with the Vagina Monologues, I think it was quite. We got in quite well. I think if it's classic texts that theatres are aware of that we're adapting into BSL, then I think we get in easier, David. I think if we're bringing a new devised play or a play that's been written by a new playwright, I think that's where we struggle. I think, theatres want stuff that they know. They want big epic plays. Perhaps they want musicals. They want things that's going to sell for them. And I absolutely get that perspective, particularly in the current climate that we live in. But for us, we want to put work that's led by deaf people and puts that deaf voice on stage. And I think that is a harder sell to get into spaces. Absolutely. But I have to say, Definitely Theatre has been running since 2002. So that's 23 years. And we've staged a main production every year at a number of venues. So we're very lucky to get in the door, because we can prove we have an audience and we create quality work.
Well, going back to 2002, Jenny Seeley's of Grey Eye's been on this podcast before, and she'd been heading Grey Eye about 6 years by then, but that's deaf and disabled. What was the situation like in 2002 that spurred you on to want to create Definitely Theatre?
Oh, absolutely. I was an actor. I was a freelance actress for 10 years in mainstream theatre, working in theatre and education, community theatre, and also on rep stages around the UK. I was in Children of a Lesser God twice, I think it was. And I had a bad injury, actually, David, after falling off the stage, but perhaps the story for another day. And also I was a presenter on television as well. There was a television series and did some other drama work. So I was very lucky to be a jobbing actress back then. But at the same time, I was like, where is the deaf voice? On television, on stage, in film, where is it? I wanted stories from the deaf perspective. I wanted to see more deaf people leading projects, British Sign Language, BSL leading projects. I felt that was really missing. And at that time, back in 2002, the numbers of deaf actors were really, really small. It was really hard to be a full-time actor. And I actually met the most wonderful, amazing person who worked for the Arts Council of England back then. Her name is Jo Hemmant. And she, this is her sign name. We sign Jo like this because she's a very calm lady, very calm. And she actually encouraged me to apply for a project grant. from the Arts Council England. I didn't even know you could do that, David. I didn't know as it was a new thing for me as a deaf actor. I was like, why not? Let's do this. So we created our first ever show, and it was called Deaf History. And it was a really short work in progress showing, really. So we decided to perform it in a really small theatre venue, and it sold out, David. It's because, and there was no publicity. Literally, it was people telling friends who told other people, and the audience was full.
Yeah.
Every performance, just amazing. And it's like, okay, so there's an audience there. So we actually had to find another venue to do it again for another 3 nights. And we sold out again. And it was just amazing because deaf people didn't really have access to theatre back then. So I had to write a report at the end of this project. And I thought, let's apply for another project grant. Let's do another play because we've proved it was successful. And then we did another one. And then another one, and then another one. And then Definitely Theatre was born really from this. And I think it was in 2004 that we were encouraged to go for NPO status, so to be a national portfolio organisation with the Arts Council, and to ask for core funding to sustain us. And we had to get a board of trustees in as well. And we hired, someone to help us complete the NPO application because for me, as a deaf person who's dyslexic as well, has a neurodiversity and who grew up language deprived, I didn't have access to much language when I was younger. I can visualize the creative concepts, but I needed someone to help me put it down on paper. And whether you want to call them a ghostwriter, whether you want to call them a bid writer or whatever. So someone to put together that application, and we got the funding. We got that. And that was back in 2005 that we became an NPO. And so we've been performing since then. And it's funny enough, David, we became an NPO and I had my first daughter in that year of 2005, bit of a crazy year. And I actually had my second daughter in 2010. And then the year after that, set up the Definitely Youth Theatre as well. And I suppose why I set up Definitely Theatre, I wanted to show what deaf people can do, that deaf people can do it. And that's up to now, just over 20 years, we've got the Definitely Youth Theatre programme that's been running since 2011 because we had so many young deaf people come up to us and say, I want to be an actor or I want to be on stage. Where do I go? How do I do this? So we set up a youth theatre programme. And we've developed a lot of new talent, including the very wonderful Rose Aidling-Ellis, who won Strictly Come Dancing and was recently in Code of Silence and Reunion. And William Grint is another one of our Definitely Youth performers. He currently does work with the RSC and on Shakespeare's Globe stage. Charlotte Arrowsmith as well has been an actress, director, workshop facilitator with us and has gone on to great things. I could keep going. There's lots and lots of names of people that have had opportunities through Definitely Theatre. Very proud of that. So we also do consultancy, David, and advice to other theatres who perhaps don't know how to work with deaf actors or deaf artists or how to develop their deaf audience. So we go out and advise and provide training and consultancy. And so, and here we are now. And I want to see more deaf people behind the scenes in those production roles, because as I shared, when I first started, we probably had less than 10 deaf actors that we could choose from. Now 23 years later, there's probably over 100 or more deaf actors that use BSL, variety of ages and skills, because I think, we've inspired so many people and it's great to see them going on and doing other things. And as I say, it's just about showing that deaf people can do it. It's that's our aim.
Yeah, I saw Rose Aidling-Ellis in Mother Courage at the Royal Exchange before she was on Strictly. But I think her appearance on Strictly did open a lot of people's eyes about what deaf people can do, didn't it?
Oh, absolutely. That's right. Definitely. Pardon the pun. I think, Rose has been a fantastic advocate to shine a light on what deaf people can do. And she's really changed a lot of attitudes out there because she embraces her deafness. She's very proud of who she is. And, it's just shown that, if society opens their minds and the barriers go away, if, learn sign language and sign language, not just for us, it's for you as well. If we can all sign together, then, there's full access. Deaf people can do anything but hear. And there's an accommodation that we can do to overcome that. And I think, there's an absolutely, what is that old saying? If you can't speak the language, maybe you're not as intellectually developed. But that's not true. Your ability to speak does not dictate your, brain ability, your cognitive ability at all. We speak a different language. My own partner, he doesn't speak at all. His spoken voice is not what he wants to use, but his written English is just incredible. It's so way above mine. And my two deaf daughters have got, one of them's done an A-level in English. The other one's currently doing a GCSE, and they can do anything. Nothing's stopping them. And I think what we need to sort of show is you can do things. It doesn't matter if you speak or not. It's what, as long as you have access to language, that's so important.
Yeah. And when I spoke to Jenny Seeley for this podcast, she was saying how when she started, she cobbled together a system for surtitles using PowerPoint that she had to operate herself. And the technology has really come on for that sort of thing now. But there are so many different ways of incorporating multiple languages into performance now, and I saw one at the Edinburgh Book Festival last year where some of it was signed, some of it was titled, some of it they just signed and didn't translate for us, and we knew what they meant. So what methods do you use to incorporate it into performance?
So for us, Definitely Theatre, our core audience is deaf and hearing people. Our aim always for Definitely Theatre is to build a bridge between deaf and hearing audiences, that everyone is equal. If there's a funny joke, everyone's laughing at the same time.
Yeah.
I know I've experienced it myself where I go and watch stuff and hearing people around me are laughing and I don't get the joke. And maybe the captions, maybe the English isn't funny, or maybe I don't understand the joke because it's probably in the delivery rather in, the actual words. Or if I'm watching a theatre interpreter who's standing in the corner, if they're far away from the actual action, they're translating 5 or 6 actors on the stage, and they're all, all the actors are talking very fast, so that interpreter's having to sign very fast to keep up. So what was the joke? Which person was it? It's like watching and feel like you're playing tennis, because your head is just going from side to side all the time. Very frustrating, David, absolutely. And I think for me and for our audience, seeing deaf actors on the stage delivering in BSL, you have that direct relationship. I think that's so important, and that's what we want to do, to give people that opportunity. So for us, each of our productions that I direct have different ways of making themselves accessible depending on the style of the show. Sometimes we've had plays with full English spoken voiceover. Sometimes we've had scenes that have just been in BSL, or, just been in speech with captions, or, we experiment depending on what we want to create. Like I directed a play at Shakespeare's Globe, and that was an amazing experience. I've actually directed there twice, and both of those productions were actually very different and had very different styles. The first was a full BSL production of Love Labour's Lost. There was no voiceover at all, and how it worked was that they had scene summaries that were in written English on the sides of the stage. And we also had music underscoring throughout. So we had live musicians. They were actually playing on the stage in amongst our actors to really help create the atmosphere, to know what was going on. And, for me right now, I'm using BSL in this chat with you, David, which is everyday BSL. It's more conversational British Sign Language, I suppose. But if I was standing on Shakespeare's Globe stage, I would use what I call a combination of body language, of gesture, of iconic signs that you would recognise. Iconic signs like everyone knows, like this one: car, drink, walk, sleep. There you go, or tired.
Yeah, I understood
like
that one.
Absolutely, you got that. So, I mean, we absolutely can create visual language that hearing people get. And I've seen hearing audience members go, "Oh, I understand the sign," or "Oh, I got that." And that's amazing because it's visual, it's iconic. And that's what we did there to make it, accessible. But it depends on the production. Every production is slightly different. And then the second time we went to Shakespeare's Globe, it was different. We did A Midsummer Night's Dream, which is obviously a very well-known Shakespeare comedy. And there's kind of three groups in that. You've got the fairy world, you've got, the workmen who are putting on the play, and then you've got the lovers, the four lovers. So there's kind of different classes, I suppose, different status. Our workmen who are putting on the play, for us, they used more what we call grassroots BSL, more conversational BSL. Our fairies, our fairy world, they were very fantastical, very lots of visual imagery, very poetic, use what we call VV, visual vernacular, so this visual way of communicating. And then the lovers, Hermia, Helena, Demetrius, Lysander, very lots of gesture, lots of theatrical BSL, theatrical sign. So it was different languages in the same play, depending on who the people were and which group they were from. And for that play, I don't think we had captions throughout. No, there was no captions throughout because we had quite a limited set and limited time to get in and out, as I'm sure you appreciate. So, yes, we had to make sure that for us, that play was accessible for hearing audiences as well. And I chose Dream because it's famous. It's people know the story. They may have done it at school, or they've seen a production, or they might have seen a movie adaptation. So they have an awareness of the story. So we had Puck, our lead character, when the king of the fairies was doing a long speech in sign, Puck would voice perhaps the first three lines of that speech, like to ground it in English. And then he'd watch his master, delivering the rest of the speech. And then we might pick some other lines that were really important to get information across in the middle, say. So another three lines, say, in the middle. And then, carry on, silence. And then perhaps do the end, like the last three lines of a really long monologue. And then people would get that they had some English backup for what they were seeing, but then they had to just look at what they were seeing. But I think Shakespeare is world famous. It's a world famous play. And I also think audiences like to be challenged, David, and they like to have new experiences sometimes. And, we can't spoon feed people all the time, can we? They want to use their brains and process and see what they can experience. So, as I say, it just depends on what the play is. And I have a favourite writer, actually. One of my favourite writers is Mike Bartlett.
Oh, yes.
And I'm sure you know his wonderful work. And I directed one of his plays called Contractions back in 2017. And that play is a two-hander. So it's the manager and the staff member. So our manager was a really strong BSL user, a really hard, cold woman. And then the staff member, who is like the work colleague, that's the character, her subordinate, quite victim, quite submissive. She used sign-supported English. So she would actually speak in English and sign at the same time. So those two characters had very different language modes in the play. So when the manager would sign her dialogue fully in BSL, our hearing audience did not have full access to that, but they would kind of watch and understand. and then the actress who was playing the staff member would respond to the question, like take some of the dialogue in hers. So say the manager signed, "How are you?" like this. So the manager would sign, "How are you?" to the staff member. Emma would reply, "Yes, I'm fine." So the question was in her answer. So you got access to it that way. And then also, if there was other, bits of information that the manager wanted to get across, then Emma, the character, would repeat some of her lines like she was processing them or understanding them. Yeah. And so we got it across that way.
It's nice that there are layers there that a deaf audience would get and that a hearing audience possibly wouldn't, because quite often I would imagine it's the other way around. Shakespeare used verse and prose for different classes, and you're using different ways of signing, and that's really interesting because a deaf audience would get that, and I wouldn't understand that.
Absolutely, and I think it's interesting, that there was an American family that came to watch the production at the Globe, I remember, and they were like, "Oh, this is a deaf production. Maybe we should leave in the interval." But then we overheard them saying, "No, I loved it," and they stayed all the way through. So, yeah.
Okay, to finish with then, what's next for you or for Definitely Theatre? What do you want? What do you want to do, or what can you say you're doing next?
Well, as you know, we're taking Vagina Monologues on tour in July to Exeter, Sheffield and Birmingham, which we're very excited about. And then in the autumn, we've got a new production called Barriers. And we commissioned a young, deaf female playwright. Her name is Eloise Pennicott. She was actually born hearing, but she lost her hearing. She became deaf when she was, I think, about 11. So, but for her, she's really embraced who she is now. She's gone out and learned BSL. She's involved in the deaf community. She's really proud of who she is. She's been involved in the Definitely Youth Theatre as well. And she actually wrote Barriers as a short play, first of all, that there was a playwriting competition that the National Theatre held for young and emerging playwrights. So she won that competition a few years ago. So the short version was staged at the National Theatre. And then I saw that production and then commissioned her to expand it into a full-length play. So that's going to be on this autumn, I should say, David. And it's a new piece. It's about a deaf and hearing woman who they speak different languages. They come together and they end up in a relationship that evolves. And it's about how society makes their relationship difficult, the barriers that it puts in place, and how they can overcome those barriers as people who come from different experiences and who speak different languages.
That was Paula Garfield MBE via the voice of the brilliant BSL interpreter Kathy Yeoman-Owens talking about her production for Definitely Theatre of The Vagina Monologues by V, formerly Eve Ensler, which will be performed at Exeter Northcott Theatre on the 15th of July, Crucible Theatre Sheffield on the 17th of July and the Rep in Birmingham on the 19th of July 2025. For more information, see www.definitelytheatre.co.uk, that's DEAFINITELY, or contact the theatre box offices for tickets.
You've been listening to a podcast from British Theatre Guide. For more information, please visit britishtheatreguide.info.